man on the ridge had been lying still for 11 minutes before he raised the rifle, and I only caught the movement because I had spent 3 years training myself to notice exactly that kind of stillness gone wrong. I was 30 feet from the trading post door, walking Tanner's trail, cold and careful, when the sun caught something on the rocks above the yard, a flash no bigger than a coin, and every instinct I owned went off at once. She was crossing the open ground with a crate of traded blankets balanced against her hip, dark auburn hair braided back, sleeves rolled to the elbow, moving through the morning light the way people move when they believe, correctly, that this particular yard has never once been dangerous. I did not know her name yet. I only knew that the rifle on the ridge was not aimed at me. I moved before I finished deciding to. My boots hit the dust in 3 long strides, and I caught her around the waist and drove us both sideways into a stack of flour barrels. And I remember the trading post bell jingling somewhere above us, thin and cheerful, and completely wrong for what was happening. And I remember the exact half-second the shot arrived, not a sound so much as a fact, delivered directly into my left shoulder, hot and total. Flour burst around us in a white cloud. The barrels went over. I heard her cry out, not for herself, but for me, already understanding what had happened before I did. And then the sky tipped sideways above me, a hard blue the color of a knife blade, and I lay in the spilled flour and the settling dust, with my ears ringing and thought, with the strange clarity that arrives right before you lose consciousness, that in 3 years of hunting men for money, I had never once asked myself what it would cost to stop moving long enough to save someone. I was 34 years old, and I had built a reputation the way some men build a barn, one board at a time, out of necessity, without much pleasure in the process. They called me the fastest gun in 3 territories, which was the kind of thing that got printed in newspapers and got you hired and got you shot at, sometimes in that order. I had tracked Royce Tanner and the 2 men riding with him across 400 miles of Colorado and Arizona territory for a $500 bounty, which was good money in the year 1881, the kind of money that could set a man up with land if he ever decided to stop moving long enough to file a claim under the Homestead Act and put in his 5 years of proving it up. I had never filed a claim. I had never stayed anywhere long enough to want to. If I lost this, I understood. Lying in the dust with my shoulder on fire, I would lose more than the bounty. I would lose the only thing I had left to prove I was good for something, which was a job I did well and alone, and I would lose it for a girl whose name I did not yet know. I woke up 3 days later in a narrow bed in the back room of the Cobb trading post, under a quilt that smelled of cedar and lye soap, with my shoulder wrapped tight in linen someone had changed more than once, judging by the neat, careful stitching along the wound's edge. The window stood open. I could smell wood smoke and coffee, and underneath that, the dry, sweet grass smell of high desert country in late summer. She was sitting in a chair by the window, mending a shirt I recognized, after a moment, as my own. "You're awake," she said, not looking up right away, the way people do when they've been waiting for something so long, they've stopped believing it will happen and don't want to be wrong about it now. "Good. My father was starting to lose money on the whiskey he's been threatening to pour down your throat if the fever didn't break." "How long?" I said. My voice came out like gravel. 3 days. She set the mending down. "You took a rifle ball meant for me, mister." She stopped. "I don't actually know your name." "Gideon." "Delia," she said. "Cobb, this is my father's post." She looked at me steadily, the way you look at a debt you didn't ask for and don't know how to refuse. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said, "because it was true, and because there wasn't a better answer." I want to tell you I recovered quietly and rode out inside the week, the way I had ridden out of every town before it, but that would be a lie, and I have told enough lies in my professional life that I see no reason to start telling them here. What happened instead was that Elias Cobb came in that evening, looked at the wound, looked at his daughter, and said, with the particular flatness of a man stating a fact he has already made peace with, that I would be staying until I could ride without opening the stitches, and that he expected me to earn my keep at the counter in the meantime, since a man with a gun arm still working could at least stand guard while she worked the ledgers. I had never worked a counter in my life. I learned that flour ran 3 to 5 cents a pound depending on the season and the freight costs up from Santa Fe, that a good wool blanket traded fair for 2 deer hides or their equivalent in silver, and that Delia Cobb managed all of it, the pricing, the credit, the delicate arithmetic of trust, with a precision that made me start paying attention to her in a way I had not planned on and did not at first care for. There is a thing that happens to a man who has spent years training himself not to want anything he can lose. He stops noticing the wanting until it is already too large to argue with. I noticed it the 3rd week, watching Delia settle an account dispute with a freight driver twice her size, calm and immovable, never once raising her voice, and I thought, with something close to alarm, that I had started looking forward to mornings in a way I had not done since I was a much younger man with much less sense. The Apache band that traded at the post came through twice that month, led by an elder named Yiska, iron-haired and steady-eyed, who greeted Delia by name and asked after her father's cough before he asked about anything else. I watched the whole transaction from behind the counter with my arm in a sling, blankets and flour and 2 good knives traded for tanned hides and a bundle of dried herbs Delia swore by for fevers, and I understood watching it that this arrangement had taken years to build and could be broken in an afternoon by the wrong kind of trouble. The wrong kind of trouble arrived on a Tuesday. I was out back checking the woodpile. My shoulder healed enough by then to be more nuisance than injury, when I heard riders coming in fast and heard Elias Cobb's voice go tight and careful, the way a man's voice goes when he is trying not to sound afraid in front of his daughter. I came around the building with my gun hand steadier than it had any right to be after 3 weeks of mending, and found Royce Tanner sitting his horse in the yard with 2 men flanking him, all 3 of them looking considerably less injured than the last time I'd seen them. "Figured you'd still be here," Tanner said. "Sweet on the girl who patched you up." "Ride on, Tanner." "I would," he said, "except you cost me a job, and I don't forgive that cheap." He looked past me at Delia, who had come to stand in the doorway with a stillness I would come to know well. Not fear exactly, but the particular readiness of someone who has decided not to give anyone the satisfaction of watching her be afraid. "Course," Tanner said, "I hear there's been trouble out this way lately. Raiders hitting the smaller posts. Terrible thing. Be a shame if word got around that the Apache your girl trades with had a hand in it." He said it lightly, the way you say a threat you intend to make good on. Then he turned his horse and rode out, unhurried, and I stood in the yard with my heart going harder than the wound in my shoulder had ever managed, understanding exactly what he meant to do. "I want to tell you I had a plan by nightfall. I did not. What I had was a bad feeling and a debt I had not finished paying, and those 2 things kept me awake long after the post had gone dark and quiet, staring at the ceiling and thinking about a man named Coy Walsh, who had ridden with me 2 years earlier and whom I had let walk into a gunfight alone because I had hesitated half a second too long, weighing whether the risk was worth taking for a partner instead of a payday. Coy had not survived the hesitation. I had built the whole shape of my life since then around never letting myself care enough about another person to hesitate that way again. Lying awake in the Cobb post that night, I understood for the first time how completely that plan had already failed. 2 days later, word came through from a rider out of the territorial office that a smaller trading post 20 miles east had been burned and robbed, the owner's family shot, and that the description of the raiders, vague, second-hand, exactly the kind of story that spreads fastest when it's wrong, pointed to Yiska's people. Elias Cobb went pale reading the notice. Delia went still in a way that frightened me more than any gunfight I had ever walked into. "They didn't do this," she said, not a question, a fact she was daring anyone in the room to dispute. "I know," I said. "You don't know that," her father said carefully. "None of us were there, Delia." "I know Yiska," she said. "I know his people. I know what fair trade costs when you're the one keeping the ledger honest on both sides. And I am telling you that a man who has never once shorted us on a hide or broken a promise in 6 years did not ride 20 miles to burn a family alive." She looked at me. "You believe me?" It wasn't a question either. And here is the thing I have turned over in my mind more times than I can count since that night. I did believe her, immediately and completely, in a way that had nothing to do with evidence and everything to do with the particular certainty of a woman who has spent her whole life learning to read people accurately because her family's survival depended on it. I opened my mouth to tell her something. What I meant to say, I am still not entirely sure, whether it was about Yiska or about her, or about the 3 weeks I had spent behind that counter learning the weight of staying somewhere. But the words did not come, because at that exact moment we heard horses again, and this time there were more of them. Yiska himself rode into the yard that night, with 4 riders behind him, and for one terrible second I thought Tanner had gotten there first with his story and turned the whole territory into a powder keg. Instead, Yiska dismounted, walked straight to Elias Cobb and laid on the counter a torn piece of cloth, a cracked pocket watch, and a boot heel with a distinctive silver nail pattern hammered into it. "Found near the burned post," Yiska said, in careful, unhurried English. "Not ours. I know every man in my camp's boots. I know this pattern." He looked at me directly. "White man's work. Recent, made to look like something else." I turned the boot heel over in my hand and felt something cold settle into my chest, because I recognized the silver nail pattern. I had seen it 3 weeks earlier on Royce Tanner's boot, planted in the dust of this very yard, while he sat his horse and threatened a girl I had already, without quite admitting it to myself, decided I would not let anything happen to. This was the moment the whole shape of things reversed on me. I had ridden into that territory believing I was the instrument of justice, the man who tracked down the guilty and collected what the law owed him for it. I understood now that I had been wrong about who the guilty party was from the very start, and that the real danger had never been the Apache band the town was so ready to blame. It had been sitting in my own gun sights 3 weeks earlier, and I had let him ride away. We rode out before dawn, Yiska's men and myself, and found Tanner and his 2 riders camped 8 miles north, careless, in the particular way of men who believe they have already gotten away with something. I will not walk you through the fight in detail. It was short, and it was ugly, and it ended the way these things end when one side has spent 3 years surviving on speed, and the other side has spent that same time believing his own reputation would do his work for him. Tanner did not ride away a second time. What I remember more clearly than the fight is riding back into the post yard afterward, bone-tired and bloodied at the knuckles, and finding Delia standing in the doorway exactly where she had stood 2 nights before, except this time her face broke open with something I had not seen on it yet. Not fear, not the careful readiness, just relief, plain and unguarded. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." "You didn't say that," she said. "You didn't say anything. You just rode out." She was right. I had ridden out without a word, the way I had ridden out of every town before this one. And it was only standing there in the yard, with the sun coming up gold over the dry grass, that I understood the difference. That every other time I had been riding away from something, and this time I had ridden out to protect it and come back to it. which was not a thing I had done in longer than I cared to admit. "I meant to tell you something," I said, "before Yiska rode in. I still mean to tell you. I just don't know that I've got the words worked out right yet." Delia looked at me for a long moment, the same steady look she'd given me the first day I woke up owing her a debt I hadn't asked for. "Take your time," she said. "I've got nowhere to be. My father says the accounts have never been in better order since you started standing guard at that counter." I stayed, not immediately, not without a fair amount of arguing with myself, the way a man argues with a horse that already knows where it's headed. But I filed a claim 11 miles south of the Cobb Post that autumn, 160 acres under the Homestead Act, and I put in the work the law required. And somewhere in the middle of building a life I had never planned on wanting, Delia Cobb started riding out most evenings to see how the fences were coming and stopped pretending that was the only reason. Yiska's people still trade at the post. I still stand the counter some mornings, though I've gotten considerably better at pricing flour than I was that first month. And every so often, when the light goes gold over the grass the way it did the morning I rode back into that yard, Delia will remind me that I never did finish telling her what I meant to say. "I have finished it since. It didn't take nearly as many words as I'd feared." She never asked me to stay. She just started setting 2 cups out for coffee and never went back to setting out 1.